Jonas Hale had survived exactly 3 community events in his entire adult life, and each one had been a disaster. This one was shaping up to be disaster number 4, except worse, because he wasn't even drunk, and the hall was packed with people who actually wanted to socialize. The annual harmony pairing ceremony of the Aris 9 colony was supposedly about cultural integration between humans and the tall, elegant Elyndran settlers. In practice, it was a public matchmaking ritual wrapped in sentimental speeches about unity. Jonas stood near the back, holding a cup of something purple and terrible, trying to project the aura of a man doing something extremely important. Hard to do when he was just standing. His supervisor had forced him to attend. Something about team cohesion and role modeling, both ideas that made Jonas want to crawl into an air duct and live there permanently. He was 27, apparently young enough to set an example. That alone should have disqualified him. Counselor Merev, who took her volunteer duties far too seriously, called people to the stage one by one. The chosen person would look out at the audience and select a partner for a week-long bonding period. Voluntary in name, socially mandatory in practice. Decline, and the entire colony judged you with the intensity normally reserved for crimes. Jonas watched others stumble through their choices, blushing, trembling, occasionally crying until his data pad buzzed. 40 more minutes before he could fake an emergency. Then he heard his name. Jonas Hale, please step forward. Hundreds of eyes rotated toward him. Jonas briefly considered sprinting for the exit, but the way was blocked by bodies and his supervisor's death glare. He walked forward, every step felt like a countdown to doom. Take your time, Counselor Merev said cheerfully. Look around and choose someone you feel drawn to. Drawn to? Jonas wanted to choose the exit. He lifted his hand, didn't even look at the crowd, and pointed at the first shape he saw in his peripheral vision, just to end the humiliation faster. The room fell silent. No, shocked silent. Jonas followed their gaze and saw her. A tall woman standing half-hidden behind a pillar, long silver-black hair falling like liquid shadow, her elongated Elyndran ears adorned with understated metallic rings. She hadn't mingled, hadn't spoken, hadn't moved until now. But when she stepped into the light, Jonas forgot how lungs worked. Her eyes, pale, sharp, assessing, landed on him. I accept, she said, voice steady, resonant. Someone dropped a glass. Counselor Merev's smile twitched. Wonderful, highly unexpected, but wonderful. Awkward clapping followed. Jonas nodded stiffly at the woman he had just accidentally bonded with, then fled the hall the moment it was socially permissible. Outside, he leaned against the wall and exhaled. 7 days of bonding activities with a stranger. 7 days he could have spent fixing transport engines in blissful silence. That was remarkably bold, a voice said behind him. Jonas nearly jumped out of his skin. She was there, the woman he'd selected. Up close, she was even more striking, carrying herself with an effortless, grounded authority that made the air feel thinner. I'm sorry, Jonas blurted out. I didn't mean I wasn't, it was random. You can back out, really, please back out. Why would I? She tilted her head, studying him the way a scientist studies an unexpectedly interesting variable. I accepted. But I didn't even see you. That, she said, a faint curve touching her lips, is precisely why I'm curious. She didn't offer a handshake, he didn't attempt one. I'm Seris, she said. Jonas, he replied. Which you already know because they shouted it at me. 2 Elyndrans stepped out of the shadows behind her, tall and silent. Jonas blinked. Do your friends always follow you around like that? Seris didn't even glance back at them. They worry. That seems like the kind of worrying people do for someone very important, Jonas muttered. Seris's expression didn't change. I will see you tomorrow at the designated hour. And just like that, she walked away, gliding more than moving, her silent escorts falling into formation. Jonas stood there, confused and exhausted, before finally muttering, This is going to be a nightmare. He didn't yet wonder why the entire hall had gasped when he pointed at her. He didn't ask why she had been hiding at the edge of the crowd. He didn't consider that some Elyndran names, like Seris, were reserved for the highest ranks. The itinerary for day 1 arrived on Jonas's data pad at dawn. Accompanied by an aggressively cheerful notification chime, he immediately regretted not muting. Suggested conversation topics, recommended posture guidelines, and shared cultural value exercises filled the screen. He considered faking a medical emergency. He even researched whether sudden onset vertigo could be used as a socially acceptable escape. Sadly, the answer was no. When he reached the cafe listed as their meeting point, Seris was already there. Of course she was. She sat at a corner table with her back against the wall, offering a full view of every entrance. Her posture was composed, alert, the exact opposite of what someone attending a casual bonding activity should look like. Two Elyndrans sat at the adjacent table, trying and failing to appear like ordinary customers. A third stood near the door, pretending to read a menu. Jonas stared. "Do you always travel with an entourage?" "They are companions," Seris replied. "They're wearing concealed armor." "They worry." Jonas sat down slowly, as if proximity alone might trigger some political incident. "So," he began, opening the menu purely to have something to look at. "The itinerary says we're supposed to talk about shared interests or life goals. My life goal is avoiding public speaking, and any speaking. Honestly, silence in general." Seris didn't blink. "Tell me about the colony's supply chain infrastructure." Jonas blinked enough for both of them. "That's your idea of a first-day conversation topic." "You work in cargo transport," Sarah said. "Your insights would be useful." Useful? The word lit up some part of Jonas's brain that had been dormant since he arrived on Aris 9. He spent most days fixing things no one appreciated and pointing out systemic inefficiencies no one cared to correct. Being asked, genuinely asked, for his thoughts felt strangely good. "The distribution network is inefficient," he said, leaning forward. "Everything routes through one hub, so whenever demand spikes, everything bottlenecks. If we decentralized." "By how much?" Seris asked. 30% improvement minimum. Maybe more if we rerouted auxiliary lanes. But try telling that to the council. They measure success by lack of complaints, not by actual performance. Seris's eyes sharpened with interest. "And if you were in charge?" "I'd fire half the administrators, promote the competent 3, redesign the entire routing system, upgrade the scheduling AI." He stopped, cheeks warming. "Sorry, I get carried away." "Don't apologize," Sarah said. "Continue." They talked for nearly 2 hours. Jonas explained engine diagnostics, supply metrics, and the art of coaxing a temperamental cargo hauler into cooperating. Seris listened with a focus that was almost unsettling, not polite interest, not small talk, but real attention. Several times he caught her companions taking discreet notes. When they finally stepped outside, Jonas exhaled hard. "That wasn't as terrible as I expected," he admitted. Seris considered him with the quiet intensity of someone who rarely wastes words. "You think clearly, directly, without pandering. It is refreshing. That might be the kindest way anyone has described my social skills." "Tomorrow," she said, "we have a cultural exchange activity. Should I be worried?" "Yes," she said without a hint of humor. And then she walked away. Day 3 was worse, much worse. The cultural exchange involved Elyndran performance art, which, as far as Jonas could tell, consisted of slow, elegant movements combined with philosophical metaphors no human neural structure was built to interpret. He tried, he truly did. But by the end of it, he had accidentally insulted an elderly artist by standing in the reflection pathway, which apparently symbolized rebirth through adversity. "Why," he muttered afterward, "does everything in your culture have 17 symbolic layers?" "Elyndran expression is meant to reveal the mind," Seris replied. "Your mind was clearly overwhelmed." "That's a very diplomatic way of saying I embarrassed myself." "Correct," Jonas sighed. "Can we please do something tomorrow that doesn't require symbolism literacy?" "What would you propose?" He hesitated, then said the only thing he truly cared about: "My ship." Day 4, Hangar 12. Jonas stood proudly in front of his battered cargo hauler, the Resolute Sparrow, which had the approximate elegance of a grumpy refrigerator. "You named your vessel after yourself," Seris observed. "Look, we can't all have poetic Elyndran names that sound like starlight and destiny." He lowered the ramp. It groaned loudly in protest. "That's new," Jonas muttered. "Add it to the list. You maintain a list of structural failures." "Of course, it has its own list now." He led her into the engine bay, where half-disassembled components lay across tables in various states of hopeful repair. "This is the plasma flow assembly," he said, lighting up as he opened a panel. "The manufacturer built it to maximize stability, but that kills efficiency. So I'm trying to re-angle the plasma injector too." Seris stepped closer, not flinching when he accidentally brushed her arm with a grease-covered hand. "You are happy here," she said quietly. Jonas froze. "What?" "When you work," she continued. "When you solve problems, when you fix things, your mind is not burdened here. He swallowed. Machines make sense, people don't. People are complex. People have expectations, agendas, opinions, and sometimes they stare at you in a giant hall while you accidentally point at a stranger. A faint smile tugged at Seris's lips, just barely visible. Jonas hesitated, then said softly, "You ask a lot of questions that don't feel like bonding week questions." Seris's expression shifted, not cold, not distant, but heavy, weighted. "There are responsibilities I carry," she said, "that I cannot fully explain yet, roles I did not choose." "That sounds lonely," Jonas said. "It is." She took a breath, the first unsteady one he had ever heard from her. "You speak to me as if I am simply a person." "You are a person." Her eyes softened, but before she could reply, one of her companions appeared at the hangar doorway, posture tense. He spoke in Elyndran, low and urgent. Seris answered sharply, her tone slicing through the air. The exchange lasted a minute, ending with him bowing before withdrawing. Seris exhaled. "Tomorrow will bring complications, an arrival, people who expect explanations." "Should I be preparing for something?" "Yes," she said, "but I am not sure how." "Great," Jonas muttered. "That's definitely reassuring." Seris looked at him, something raw flickering beneath her composed exterior. "Thank you," she said softly, "for today, for treating me without fear, without calculation." Then she left with her silent guards, vanishing into the corridor. Jonas stood beside his ship, tools in hand, heart beating far too fast. Jonas was halfway through recalibrating the Sparrow's plasma injector the next morning when every comm device in the hangar erupted at once. His data pad buzzed. The ship's console lit up. Even the old analog radio mounted on the wall crackled to life like it had finally awakened from a 10-year coma. All personnel to main landing pad. Diplomatic arrival in progress. Formal protocols required. Jonas dismissed it. Diplomatic arrivals happened occasionally on Aris 9, inspectors, negotiators, visiting scholars. Nothing to do with him, nothing to interfere with his engine work. Then his supervisor sent a direct message. "Get to the pad. Now. And yes, you too." Jonas groaned, wiped his hands on a rag, and headed toward the landing area, muttering a long list of mechanical problems he would rather fix than deal with whatever this was. The colony's main pad was chaos. Humans and Elyndrans crowded behind barricades. Officials in stiff formal wear lined up like decorative plants. The noise level rose and fell in anxious waves. But the ship descending wasn't like the usual visitors. It was Elyndran, unmistakably so, sleek curves, shimmering hull plating, symbols etched in flowing patterns that caught the sun and refracted it into pale ribbons of color. It looked impossibly expensive. Jonas spotted his supervisor, who stood ramrod straight. "What's going on?" Jonas asked. His supervisor didn't look at him, just watch. The ship touched down with ceremonial precision. The boarding ramp extended. Elyndran officials emerged first, tall, adorned in layered robes, their elongated ears decorated in complex patterns of metal and crystal. They formed a procession, each stepping aside to create a dignified aisle. Then someone appeared at the top of the ramp. Seris, except not the Seris Jonas knew. This Seris wore deep silver and midnight blue ceremonial robes threaded with metallic accents that seemed woven from starlight. Her hair, usually loose or simply tied back, had been shaped into an intricate crown-like structure. Her jewelry was no longer subtle. It was symbolic, heavy, unmistakably authoritative. She moved like someone who had been trained from childhood to walk under scrutiny. Every official on the pad bowed. "Your Radiance," one of them said loudly enough for the entire colony, including Jonas, to hear. "Aris 9 humbly welcomes the Ascendant Heir of Elyndra." Jonas's brain stopped. Ascendant Heir, not diplomat, not scholar, not important person. She was the heir to the Elyndran Empire, the woman he had accidentally pointed at, the woman he'd argued with about logistics, the woman he'd invited into his messy engine bay, the woman he'd shown his ship's failing plasma systems to, the woman he'd told repeatedly that people were annoying and he preferred machines. Seris was royalty. Not metaphorically, literally, his legs went weak. His supervisor gripped his arm to stop him from fleeing. "You're staying," she hissed. "She asked for you." "That makes it worse," Jonas whispered back. He watched helplessly as Seris glided across the pad, speaking with officials, receiving greetings, issuing nods of royal approval. She looked nothing like the woman from the cafe or the hangar, but at the same time she looked exactly like her. The same posture, the same intensity, the same quiet loneliness hidden under layers of duty. Finally, she looked up, found him instantly, and the world narrowed into a tunnel. Later, inside the freshly redecorated main hall, Jonas tried to merge with the wall. It didn't work. People kept staring at him. Whispers rippled. Is that him? The human who bonded with her? He pointed at the Ascendant Heir. On accident. He must have a death wish. Jonas considered melting into the floor. Then Seris appeared beside him, still in her regalia, still flanked by guards, still impossibly composed. Jonas, she said quietly, walk with me. It wasn't a suggestion. He followed her into a small side chamber. The door closed. The guards remained outside, forming an impenetrable barrier. Seris turned toward him, and the formality cracked just a little. You lied, Jonas said, the words tumbling out before he could bottle them. Or, okay, you omitted some tiny, microscopic detail, like being the next ruler of an entire species. I did not lie, Seris replied calmly. I withheld information. That's worse. I pointed at a queen in training. Jonas, she said, stepping closer, do you know what happens when I reveal who I am? No, he said honestly, but I'm guessing it involves bowing. And panic and possibly arrests. People stop seeing me, Seris said softly. They see only my position, my title, my potential use to them. Every conversation becomes an evaluation. Every word becomes strategy. I wanted, she exhaled, the sound unsteady. One evening where I could exist as myself, unobserved, unmanipulated. And then I chose you, Jonas muttered. You did not choose me, Seris said. You pointed at random. That is precisely why I accepted. Jonas blinked. I beg your pardon. For the first time in years, someone looked at me without calculation. She met his gaze fully now, unguarded for the first time since he'd known her. Do you understand how rare that is? Jonas swallowed. Okay, but you're royalty. Shouldn't you be bonding with someone important, strategic, political? The ceremony is not binding, she said, but it is recognized. And her expression softened in a way that made Jonas's chest tighten. I wanted 1 week of honesty, one person who speaks without fear, one connection that isn't built on advantage. Jonas rubbed the back of his neck. Your guards are going to follow us everywhere now, aren't they? Yes, and there will be political consequences. Undoubtedly. And the news. Likely catastrophic. Jonas closed his eyes. This is a terrible idea. A silence. Then, a magnificent one possibly, Seris said, almost smiling. But terrible as well. Jonas let out a shaky breath. You still want to finish the bonding week with me, knowing I'm a mechanic who names his ship after emotional shortcomings. Yes, Seris said simply, because for the first time in a very long time I felt seen. Jonas felt his heart tilt dangerously, too dangerously. Okay, he said before his brain could stop him. 3 more days, but I'm not bowing every 5 seconds. I would not ask that. And if we're doing this, he added, you're learning how to properly calibrate a plasma injector. Seris laughed, actually laughed, a sound soft and bright and entirely real. Deal. And everything Jonas thought he knew about his life shifted, just a little, towards something far more complicated and far more dangerous. Jonas had expected day 5 to involve awkward public appearances, carefully worded political statements, and at least 12 opportunities to embarrass himself in front of both species. What he did not expect was to wake up to a notification informing him that he was scheduled for a joint diplomatic engagement session at 900. He stared at the message. That sounds like a trap, he told his ceiling. The ceiling did not disagree. When he arrived at the designated meeting chamber, he found Seris already there. She wore less ceremonial attire than the previous day, but still far more formal than anything Jonas owned. Her robe was a sleek, high-collared design with subtle metallic patterns, like constellations woven into the fabric. Her guards flanked the room, silent and immovable. Jonas raised a hand in a half-wave, half-surrender gesture. So, what's the diplomatic session about? Please tell me it's not public questions or public anything. It is a private briefing, Seris said. A discussion between us and the Elyndran advisory delegation. Discussion, Jonas repeated, suspicious. That sounds deliberately vague. It is, Seris said, because they do not know how to speak to you yet. Ah, excellent. Nothing like awkward cultural uncertainty to start the morning. The door slid open. 3 Elyndran officials entered, 2 elderly, 1 middle-aged, all wearing robes that seemed designed to intimidate through elegance alone. Their eyes went straight to Seris, and then slowly, reluctantly, to Jonas. The middle-aged one spoke first, human Jonas Hale. Jonas nodded, present nervous, confused, all the usual. A brief moment of Elyndran blinking occurred, the non-verbal equivalent of, "We have no idea how to handle this creature." The eldest stepped forward. "We wish to understand the nature of the bond you have formed with the Ascendant Heir." Jonas froze. "The nature." Seris answered before he could panic further. "The bond is incomplete. This week's rituals must finish before any declarations can be made." The advisors turned to Jonas again, studying him like a peculiar new species. One finally asked, "What is your intention toward her radiance?" Jonas nearly choked on his own breath. "My what?" Seris pressed her lips together in what might have been amusement. The official repeated slower. "Your intention toward her radiance Seris Veridion, heir to the Elyndran crown." Intentions toward royalty. Yes, this was definitely a trap. "My intention," Jonas said carefully, "is to get through this week without causing an interplanetary incident, ideally." Silence, then Seris added smoothly, "He speaks plainly." It is one of his strengths. The officials exchanged glances. Jonas couldn't tell whether they found him refreshingly honest or catastrophically unqualified. Probably both. After an hour of tense, overly formal questioning, most of which Jonas answered by fighting the urge to hide under a table, the advisors dismissed him. As soon as the door shut, Jonas exhaled in a heavy rush. "Well, that went great," he said, "if the goal was to confuse everyone equally." Seris stepped closer. "You did well." "I said ideally, to a diplomatic delegation." "Yes," Seris said, "and they needed to hear it." Jonas stared at her. "Why?" "Because Elyndran negotiations are built on layers of implication. You provide clarity they cannot easily ignore." Jonas snorted. "That is a very poetic way of saying I'm bad at diplomacy." "That is a very poetic way of saying you excel at truth." The way she said it, soft, earnest, almost reverent, made something warm bloom in Jonas's chest. He looked away, pretending to inspect a decorative wall panel. "So what's next?" Seris hesitated, which was new. "There is an Elyndran tradition," she said. "During bonding week, a moment of mutual understanding, a choice to see one another beyond roles or expectation." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "Okay, sounds harmless. What does it involve? Because so far your traditions have involved symbolic pathways and philosophical dance movements and—" "It is simple," Seris interrupted. She stepped closer. Much closer. Close enough that Jonas could see the faint streaks of silver woven into her hair. Close enough to catch the subtle scent of something metallic and warm, like starlight against stone. "It is a ritual of honesty," she said quietly. "Both individuals speak one truth they have not voiced aloud." Jonas felt his pulse jump. "Oh." Seris waited, patient and still, her eyes searching his face. He swallowed. "You first." She shook her head. "You chose me, you speak first." A weak argument, but he was too startled to fight it. He took a breath, a long breath. And then, before he could stop himself, the truth came out small, simple, terrifying. "I like talking to you," Jonas said. "More than I expected, more than I meant to." Seris blinked, and then very slowly the faintest shimmer of warmth lit her eyes. "My turn," she whispered. Jonas nodded, heart thundering. Seris stepped even closer, her voice soft as the hum of a ship's engine. "I have been watched my entire life, judged, evaluated, protected. I have had no space to feel anything that was not political in consequence." She paused. "And then I met you." Jonas's breath caught. "In 4 days," Seris said, "you have given me more freedom than years of rule allowed." He couldn't find words, not even badly chosen ones. Everything in his chest felt too tight. Seris looked at him with a depth that made the room feel smaller. "This is why I do not regret accepting your choice," she said softly, "even if it was an accident." Jonas opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I don't know how to deal with this," he admitted. "You are doing fine," Seris murmured, which somehow made him feel even more unprepared. A soft chime from the door broke the moment. One of her guards stepped inside, bowing deeply. "Radiance," he said, "the delegation requests your presence. Preparations for tomorrow's announcement must begin." Jonas frowned. "Announcement? What announcement?" Seris didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Jonas as if memorizing him, the simplicity of him, the unpolished honesty, the complete absence of political ambition. Then she said the words that made the ground shift beneath him. "Tomorrow," Seris said, "the bond will be acknowledged publicly." Jonas stared. "You mean?" "Yes," she said softly. "All of Elyndra will know." Jonas's pulse spiked. "But I'm just—" You are Jonas. Jonas didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, replaying Seris's words over and over. Tomorrow, the bond will be acknowledged publicly. Publicly as in broadcast, as in. Two whole species finding out the future Elyndran ruler had spent a week bonding with a human mechanic who once soldered his own pants by accident. He woke before dawn, jittery and exhausted, and went straight to the hangar. The Sparrow was the only place that still made sense. Machines were predictable. Wires didn't lie. Bolts didn't have political implications. He was tightening a coolant line when he heard soft footsteps behind him. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. "You're early," Seris said. "So are you," Jonas replied. She stepped closer. She wasn't wearing ceremonial robes today, only a simple dark outfit that allowed for movement. Functional, elegant. She looked less like an untouchable figurehead and more like the Seris he'd met on the very first day, quiet, analytical, intensely present. Her gaze moved over the ship's open panels. "You were anxious. Was it that obvious?" "Yes." Jonas sighed. "I'm not exactly public ceremony material. My entire diplomatic training consists of not swearing in front of administrators." "A valuable skill," Seris said seriously. "You're not helping." She tilted her head. "Then allow me to speak plainly. There is something you must understand before today begins." Jonas paused, "Which is?" Seris walked around him until she stood in front of him, hands clasped loosely at her waist. "Elyndran law recognizes a bonding declaration as a matter of emotional intent," she said. "It cannot force commitment. It cannot demand loyalty. It simply acknowledges that two people chose to see one another." Jonas blinked. "Wait, so this isn't like a royal engagement?" "No," Seris said gently, "unless both parties choose to pursue something beyond the ritual." "And do you want that?" Seris didn't speak for several seconds. Then, "I want honesty," she said softly. "I want something real. I want a connection that is not measured by political value. You offered me that. Whether it continues beyond this week is your choice as much as mine." Jonas felt something twist in his chest, not panic this time, but something warmer, deeper, frightening in an entirely different way. Before he could respond, a comm unit at Seris's hip chimed. Her guard's voice came through. "Radiance, it is time." Seris lowered her head a fraction, resignation mixed with resolve. "We must go." The colony's central atrium had been transformed into a stage for interspecies pomp. Humans stood in their best clothes. Elyndran banners hung in elegant arcs overhead. Guards lined the walls like statues carved from shadow and steel. Jonas swallowed. Loudly. Seris's chief advisor, a tall Elyndran woman with a gaze sharp enough to shear metal, approached him. "You will stand at her right," she said. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Maintain posture, do not fidget." Jonas immediately fidgeted. The advisor closed her eyes. "Please do not do that." Seris joined him a moment later, posture perfect, expression unreadable. But when her eyes flicked toward him, there was the smallest flicker of reassurance. A silent breathe. The hall fell silent as Seris stepped onto the platform. When she spoke, her voice carried the way only a ruler's could, steady, resonant, shaped for command. "Citizens of Elyndra, partners of Aris 9, today I acknowledge a bond formed during the Harmony Week ritual. A bond unexpected, unplanned, and yet honest." A ripple went through the crowd. Seris continued. "Jonas Hale demonstrated clarity of thought, dedication to his craft, and a refusal to hide himself. In a world where every action is politicized, such authenticity is rare." Jonas felt heat rise in his face. Seris was praising him in front of diplomats, officials, administrators, people who spent their lives calculating every sentence. "He challenged me," Seris said, "not out of disrespect, but out of sincerity. He spoke without fear, and in doing so reminded me what it means to be seen not as an heir, but as a person." The crowd murmured, some surprised, some disapproving, some intrigued. Jonas stood very still, trying not to faint. "This acknowledgement," Seris said, "is not a political alliance. It is the recognition of a connection begun with honesty. What comes next will not be dictated by tradition or duty, but by our own choosing." For a moment the hall was utterly silent. Then applause began, hesitant at first, then growing, until the atrium filled with a strange, thunderous harmony of hands and Elyndran resonance tones. Seris stepped back. Her guard signaled discreetly that the ceremony was complete. Jonas exhaled for the first time in what felt like an hour. They slipped out a side door into a quieter corridor. Seris leaned against the wall, shoulders lowering slightly now that the performance was over. Jonas looked at her. Seris, he said quietly, that was a lot. Yes, she admitted, it was. You basically told an entire empire that you respected me. I do, and that I matter to you. You do, and that this could be something more. If you want it to be. Jonas swallowed, and what do you want? Sarah stepped closer, not the performative distance of ceremonies, but the intimate closeness from the hangar, the cafe, the quiet moments where her guard didn't reach her eyes. I want, Sarah said, to see where this connection leads. Without titles, without expectations, without fear. His heart stuttered painfully. And, she added, lips curving in a soft, almost playful line, I still expect you to teach me how to calibrate a plasma injector. The day after the public acknowledgement felt strangely quiet. Not literally. The colony buzzed with gossip, Elyndran analysts whispered frantically, and Jonas's supervisor kept hovering like she expected him to spontaneously combust. But inside Jonas's mind, everything felt suspended, like he was standing at the edge of something, waiting for the next step. He didn't have to wait long. A message arrived mid-morning. Hangar 12, come alone. Jonas stared at the screen. That's not ominous at all. When he reached the hangar, Seris was there, not in ceremonial dress, not with guards standing in formation, but leaning casually against a crate, arms folded, as if she'd been waiting to speak with him without an audience. Her expression softened when he entered. Jonas. Seris. They stood there a moment, quietly taking in the fact that the world around them had changed. But the two of them, standing in a hangar full of tools and half-repaired machinery, still felt strangely the same. Your guards aren't here, Jonas said. Not in the room, Seris corrected. They would never allow that, but they gave me space. Jonas nodded, then exhaled. So, I guess today is decision day. Seris didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped forward and traced her fingers along the edge of the Sparrow's access panel. You love this ship. Jonas blinked. I mean, love is strong, I tolerate it, I respect it, I yell at it. You love it, Seris said quietly. Because it is yours, because it is honest, because it asks nothing of you except what you freely choose to give. Jonas opened his mouth, then closed it. Okay, he admitted. Fine, you're not wrong. Seris turned to him fully, her eyes clear, steady, luminous in the hangar light. I want something similar, she said. A connection chosen freely, not duty, not protocol, not tradition. Jonas's heart thudded hard enough that he almost checked his pulse. And if I say yes? He asked softly. Seris moved closer, her voice lowering to a barely audible tone. Then you and I would begin something real. Not as heir and mechanic, as people. Jonas swallowed, and if I say no? Seris's expression didn't falter. Then we part as honestly as we met, without resentment, without consequence. It was exactly the right thing to say, and exactly the thing that made the decision harder. Jonas looked around the hangar, the ship he'd spent years maintaining with his own hands, the space that had once been the entirety of his world, and then he looked at Seris. Seris, who listened to him like his thoughts mattered. Seris, who had admitted loneliness with the quiet bravery of someone who had never been allowed to feel it. Seris, who had stood before her entire empire and spoken truth instead of politics. He took a shaky breath. I don't know how to do this, Jonas said. I don't know how to be what a future ruler needs. I don't know how to fit into your world. Then don't, Seris said, stepping even closer. Do not fit into my world. Walk beside me in it. Jonas's chest tightened. That sounds terrifying. It is, Seris admitted. I am terrified as well. That surprised him, really. Yes, she said, her voice softening in a way that hit him like gravity. Because this is the first choice I am making solely as myself, not as the heir. Jonas laughed short, shaky. Great, so we're both terrified. Yes, Seris said. Perfectly aligned. Jonas hesitated just one more breath. Then he reached out and took her hand, not tentative this time, but deliberate. Seris's fingers curled around his, warm and sure. So, Jonas said quietly, what happens now? Seris looked up at him with a gentleness he had never seen her show anyone else. Now, she said, we begin. It wasn't a royal proclamation. It wasn't a dramatic declaration. It was a promise, fragile, uncertain, and incredibly real. Jonas squeezed her hand. But, he added, you're still learning how to calibrate that plasma injector. A faint smile pulled at Seris's lips. I expect a full lesson. Oh, you'll get one, Jonas said, emboldened by the warmth between them. But you're not allowed to pretend the coolant array is symbolic of anything. It is not symbolic, Seris said. It is simply flawed. Jonas laughed, the kind of laugh that felt like something unknotted inside him. For a moment, they simply stood there, hand in hand, surrounded by humming tools and the faint metallic scent of the hangar air. And Jonas thought, maybe I can do